The issue of the agenda has been adopted smoothly after Herculean consultations over the last 48 hours that were chaired by the presidency team, and are delighted to have adopted for the first time an agenda item on the most important issue of loss and damage, an issue that is recognized by the vast majority of the international community as a very fundamental issue, one that has to be addressed. And look at the positive development in the inclusion on the agenda, and that this does open the door for a more in-depth, more transparent consultation and negotiation process where the landing zone for whatever conclusions we will have to arrive at through consensus, through building bridges, through accommodations, through flexibility. This is how we can achieve our goals.
In a big positive on the opening day of the climate change conference in Egypt, negotiators agreed to discuss the creation of an international mechanism for compensating poor countries that suffer large-scale damage due to climate disasters. The issue of loss and damage was included in the formal main agenda of the climate conference for the first time since the adoption of the UN Climate Convention. India welcomed the adoption of the agenda item loss and damage at COP27. What is the loss and damage issue? Why are rich countries resisting it? And what efforts have been made on this front so far?
Loss and damage is actually quite an old subject in climate negotiations. It's been discussed for more than 2 decades now, ever since the climate negotiations started. The thing that has happened in Sharm el Sheikh climate meeting is that it has been included as in the main agenda climate meeting for the first time ever. So why has it happened that the subject as old as the climate negotiations itself has come onto the agenda for the first time? Now, when we talk about loss and damage, we are essentially talking about the damages that result that are caused by climate disasters. And see increasing number of climate disasters taking place now. Well, just this year we saw a massive historic drought in Europe. We saw a massive flood in Pakistan, first in its history. We have seen increasing frequencies of heat waves, floodings, forest fires, cyclones, storms. Now, all these disasters lead to very widespread damage in the countries that get affected. The idea of loss and damage is that a lot of these countries, and especially these small countries, the island states or the poorer countries, the vulnerable countries, those are evidently also the worst affected. They need to be sort of compensated for the disasters, for the damage that is caused by these disasters. And the argument is that, these countries in themselves, they have contributed very little to climate change. Their emissions are very low. These are small countries. A lot of them are, developing countries or least developed countries. And they have not been contributing to climate change in any way, but disasters. So the argument has been that because of someone else's follies, someone else's mistakes, or because of someone else's actions, we are getting hurt, and therefore we need to be compensated in some manner. Now, compensation is not a very good word to use, not an accurate word to use, but we'll just get along with it for the time being. The idea is to just, sort of make some money available to help these countries which are hit by climate disasters. There is a list of countries that is very clearly defined. These countries, there are two lists actually: the countries which have caused climate change, and by that I mean the major responsibility of causing climate change rests on them. And this is a very clearly defined group of countries, rich and developed countries, basically the entire Western world, and also some countries in the European bloc, in the East Europe, European bloc, also Australia, New Zealand, Canada, which are responsible for causing much of global warming through the emissions that they have sent in the last 100 years of since the industrial revolution started. There is another list of countries. Again, it's a sort of overlapping list. Uh, you know, uh, the countries which are economically much better, and therefore they are, they have been held not responsible, but they have been asked to help out with money mainly, right? So these are the countries who have to offer money and technology as part of international support to the countries that get affected by uh, climate disasters. Problem is that there is a extreme discomfort on the part of the developed countries to agree to any sort of uh, loss and damage mechanism, because traditionally, and as I said, I'll come to the part where I said compensation is not the accurate word to use. Uh, that the fear in the developed world is that this would become a sort of uh, they're not very comfortable with any sort of liability regime or any sort of compensation being asked of them, because very quickly these compensation claims can spiral into billions and billions of dollars, maybe even trillions of dollars, that nobody would have any control over. These climate disasters are, cause very huge damages. But apart from that, apart from the amount of money that has to be placed, even just in the sake of argument, even as a matter of principle, the developed countries do not want to be held liable for any disaster that is taking place anywhere in the world. So that is why any sort of disaster or any sort of compensation or liability is a strong no from the developed world. That's a red line. They are not going to accept any sort of liability regime or any mechanism that asks for compensation. What has been so there is a way of getting around this thing, uh, develop a mechanism which probably would be acceptable to the developed world as well. And the idea, therefore, as I mentioned earlier, is to at least put on the table some money which is separate from all the other climate finance that has been agreed to till now, put some money aside to help the countries which have been affected by climate disasters. Now, we haven't reached that stage yet. The only thing that has happened is that it has been included in the agenda item, which means that it is up for discussion in the formal negotiation track. Till now, it was being discussed in a separate track, an independent track, uh, and therefore was probably not uh, getting the kind of momentum that it deserves. It is a sort of mainstreaming of the issue. So till now, an issue which was, uh, kept out of the main agenda would now get mainstreamed, and therefore it will be discussed at every COP, and there would be some progress that would be made. Hopefully, the progress would be faster than what was happening in the separate independent track, and eventually, the hope is that in a few years' time, sooner rather than later, there would be some money on the table to help the countries out, uh, the countries which have been affected with climate disasters. And we do not know how long it will take to actually fructify into some amount of money. Uh, Provision for money is one of the most difficult things in the climate negotiations, and we have seen the problems in getting finance for other things as well. And the even when the money flows in, the amount of money is never commensurate with the kind of requirements that are there. So financial flows are one of the most contentious things. Also, they also lead to a lot of mistrust between developing and developed countries, and it's a very difficult issue. It has always been a very difficult issue. So it's not as if just bringing loss and damage onto the uh, main agenda, which is an important step nonetheless, but it's it's still some distance away from from actual action or finding actual solutions. So loss and damage will create one more channel for climate finance. Uh, or if you look at it differently from the developed countries' perspective, it will add further burden on their responsibility to provide climate finance. So climate finance flows in for different purposes. In fact, everything requires money, and the way the climate international climate architecture is built up, a but has to come in from the developed countries. So opening up the possibility of a loss and damage finance as well would mean opening up one more channel where money has to flow in, and this money has to come in from the developed countries.